The subject of today's video was one of the top high school running backs in his class, was pegged as the next great Alabama running back, and seemingly had unlimited potential. Alabama has produced so many good running backs over the last decade that honestly there are way too many to name. In today's video though, we're going to talk about a guy who was supposed to be the next great one, but ultimately was not able to live up to the hype. He had both quite the high school and college story, and I think this video is going to be very fascinating. Today we're going to take a look at his prep career, what made him so highly recruited, his time at Alabama, and what ultimately happened to him after that. But before we get started, we're just over 5,000 subscribers away from 100k, so be sure to help me on the road to 100k and hit that subscribe button, leave a like if you want to support today's video, turn on notifications so you never miss when I upload, and let me know what player, topic, or situation I could cover in my next one. Now, let's get started. So you're probably wondering who the subject of today's video is, and it is none other than former Alabama and Florida Atlantic running back B.J. Emmons. But in order to understand what went wrong for Emmons, we first need to go back in time. Before we start this video, let me clarify that I try my best to find the truth and the most accurate information for these stories, but ultimately, I am not Emmons or his family, so I'm trying my absolute best to tell the truth and the right story here, but forgive me if there are a couple things that are wrong. Going back in time, nicknamed BJ, Cedric Emmons grew up in the large town of Morganton, North Carolina, which was between the city of Asheville and Charlotte, and had around 20,000 people. He was a big-time athlete from a young age and put all of his time into football. He became a starter at his high school as a sophomore, and from then on, the spotlight was on him. He became the star player at Morganton High School and started to get offers before his junior year. His stats, blazing speed, and immense potential led many big-time programs to pursue Emmons, but one stood out in particular to him. That was Georgia. Emmons decided to end his recruitment and commit to Georgia, and the fast-rising star was going to be the next great Bulldog running back, it seemed. He committed to the Bulldogs over Charlotte, NC State, North Carolina, and Tennessee, and at the time, he was one of the hottest prospects in the country. But why Georgia? Well, it was the coaching staff and their track record with young running backs. His high school coach said, quote, "I think that was a huge part of it. I think he wants to compete with good players. Coach Rick is very well respected around the country, and I think his moral character is well thought of. He also really likes Coach McClendon, and I think a large part of it goes back to the style of offense that Georgia runs." This was very appealing to BJ, being able to go in and compete with guys like Todd Gurley, Nick Chubb, and all the other running backs they have down there. This was a huge get for Bulldogs fans, and he was going to be joined by Elijah Holyfield in the 2016 class as well. But the commitment did come with one downside. Emmons had apparently gotten into some legal trouble and would have a misdemeanor for a controlled substance, and this would need to be resolved. He'd end up getting an attorney, and this would get resolved, but combining that with bad grades, the Emmons story was somewhat of a mess for a little while, but thankfully, he got it back on track, learned from his mistakes, and a good break would happen for him. He would improve his grades, and with that came new offers. Both Alabama and Florida offered him, and Tennessee was also back in the mix, so it was inevitable that he was going to decommit from Georgia and reopen his recruitment with all the new schools and all the new interest. That is what would end up happening, and many put him on flip watch to Alabama. It was for good reason, as Emmons ran for more than 2,200 yards and had 30 touchdowns during his senior year. A month after decommitting from Georgia, Emmons decided to head over to the SEC West and pledged to Nick Saban in the Alabama Crimson Tide. This was a huge get for the Tide program, and now he was done with the recruiting process. He said, quote, "I didn't take any visits anywhere else after my verbal to Alabama, and that offer from Alabama was a blessing, and since I committed, I've been fully committed." Emmons said he hoped to follow in the footsteps of guys like Mark Ingram, Eddie Lacy, Trent Richardson, TJ Yeldon, and Derrick Henry, and said, quote, "We are going to get another national championship. I'm glad Henry won the Heisman too. It was well deserved. Everybody knows Nick Saban in the college football world, and I think he's one of the best coaches in the nation right now. Me talking to him and him giving me an offer and what he believes in me for is great. It is everything I've ever worked for." Emmons had a roller coaster prep career, but he would be headed to the right place, and fans in the area were never going to forget him. He was one of the top North Carolina high school running backs ever, as in 36 games, he ran for 6,573 yards with 101 touchdowns, which was top 15 in state history, and he was the best in county history, making the guy a local legend. A small-town North Carolina kid was now heading to the pinnacle of college football in Alabama, and his blazing speed and athletic traits were going to make him a great fit at Bama, and that's why many were projecting him to be the next great Tide running back. He was one of the prized gems of Saban's 2016 class, as according to 24/7 Sports, Emmons was a 4-star recruit, the number 9 running back, and the 169th best player in the class of 2016. So, how would the blue chip recruit do at Alabama? From here, the B.J. Emmons story gets pretty crazy. He came into Alabama behind a couple of talented running backs, but would still get an opportunity to get some reps as a freshman. He'd play on their opening victory against USC, and would record his first and only Alabama touchdown in a win over Western Kentucky. He'd go for over 50 yards against Kent State, had 3 carries against Kentucky, and had 9 carries in a win over number 9 Tennessee. Emmons would finish his freshman season with 35 attempts for 173 yards and a touchdown, while averaging 4.9 yards per carry. He'd also have 2 catches in the receiving game and lost 1 fumble. Unfortunately, Emmons' season would be cut short as he would get hurt against Texas A&M, prematurely ending his Alabama season and his Alabama career. He decided with that injury and him falling further and further behind on the depth chart that he was going to find a new school. 5-star recruit Najee Harris was coming in, and I think he felt he was going to take the lessons and opportunities that Bama had to offer and take them somewhere else. He would not immediately get to play FBS football though. He'd entered the portal and eventually committed to Hutchinson Community College. They are arguably the top junior college program in the country, and he was hoping to have a similar story to former Alabama running back Alvin Kamara. Kamara went up to Hutchinson before he went to Tennessee and is now an NFL superstar. Emmons would do the same thing and saved his career at Hutchinson. He rushed for 694 yards and 10 touchdowns at the JUCO level and would now have a chance to play FBS football again, this time down in the Sunshine State. He decided to commit to the Florida Atlantic Owls, where he would reunite with his former offensive coordinator, Lane Kiffin. Kiffin had obviously taken the FAU job, but Emmons would not play right away. He decided to take a year off of football, take some online classes, go back home, and get rested. He decided he was going to join the team for the 2019 season, and while this was definitely an interesting scenario, it seemed to have worked out for him. In 2019, Emmons would become one of the main backs for the Owls as he'd run the ball once against Ohio State, had 2 touchdowns against UTSA, and then had a score against Southern Miss. The Owls did so well that they got to the Conference USA Championship game, and in their blowout win over UAB, he would rush for 2 scores. The Owls ended up getting to play SMU in the Boca Raton Bowl, and Emmons would have the best game of his freshman year. He ran the ball 17 times for 72 yards and a touchdown. He finished his first year down in Boca Raton with 51 carries for 237 yards and 6 scores. He showed that he was a threat to score the ball, and his potential he showed in high school was starting to be on full display. 2020 though would be an interesting season for Emmons. Because of everything going on in the world, Conference USA had a limited season, and so did Emmons. He ran the ball 4 times against Charlotte, had 56 yards against Western Kentucky, had 22 yards against Florida International, and had 25 yards and a touchdown against UMass. This was not a great season. Overall, a lot of players in 2020 got screwed over, but Emmons was kind of the pinnacle of that. He didn't play as much, only had 4 games to prove himself, and his stats suffered. He finished with 37 carries for 116 yards and 1 touchdown. It looked like he was going to break out into a star in 2020, but instead, he put up very forgettable numbers. Despite not having a great season, Emmons decided it was time to get on with his professional career, as he would declare for the 2021 NFL Draft. There were some scouts that believed he could be taken later on because of his potential, but ultimately Emmons would go undrafted. Luckily for BJ, he was signed by the Seattle Seahawks and became an undrafted free agent for them. Unfortunately though, he'd be waived in mid-June. In July of 2021, he was signed by the Las Vegas Raiders, and while he had nearly 100 yards and a touchdown in the preseason, he did not make the final roster and was signed to the practice squad. From there, he went over to the Seattle Seahawks practice squad and the Jacksonville Jaguars practice squad before he'd have a new football career. He was selected with the first pick of the 27th round of the USFL draft by the Tampa Bay Bandits and got a couple of opportunities to play there. Because of that, he was signed by the Houston Texans and has since moved on to the Canadian Football League, and as of a month ago, he signed with the Saskatchewan Roughriders, and I'm not quite sure if he's playing there or not. Overall, the BJ Emmons case is sort of a sad story. When you're at Alabama, you either shine or you get forgotten, and because of that injury and all the players there, he never got a chance to show what he was made of. After taking 2 years off, he was just starting to put it together at Florida Atlantic before the whole world came crashing down, and his stats and his career suffered. While he ultimately got a couple of opportunities on NFL practice squads, he just didn't show enough to be signed by the team, and while I wish he would have gotten an opportunity, I'm sure this has provided a lot of personal growth and learning for him. I can tell Emmons is going to keep fighting until he one day gets his chance. I remember following his recruitment coming out of high school, and following him when he was at Florida Atlantic, so Emmons was definitely a story I liked, and I hope the best for him moving forwards. But what do you guys think? If you're an Alabama fan, what do you think of BJ Emmons, who is another Alabama player I could take a look at in my next video? And if you're a fan of another school, give me another big time recruit, draft bust, or someone you forgot about that I could do next. Also, before you go, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe if you're new, and check out all my other videos on the end screen, including my video about what happened to Trey Sanders. I hope to see you guys again soon, but until next time, peace.